But he calls himself he wrote the Bnei Yisachar, right?
No,
So it's a different. I mean, yeah, the din of is from Minkach. The din of
Bnei Yisachar is
so it could
the
be
latest one.
no, it could be it's a different one. Let me see. Let me give you 1 second. And his name was. Let me see what his name was. I know his father's name was Pesach. Tzvi Elimelech Shapiro of Dinov. No, his name was Tzvi Elimelech. Yeah, the Bnei Yisachar. Okay, it's his yahrzeit is today, which is Yud Ches Tevis. But what's interesting about him, his father was a Pesach, and they didn't have children. They had children, and they stopped having children. So they got a bracha from the Noam Elimelech that they're going to have a son that's going to light up the world, and you should name him Elimelech, which they thought to be a little bit unusual because Elimelech was alive, and in fact he was alive, and they named him Tzvi Elimelech. So the story goes that this Tzvi Elimelech's father Pesach was a Malamed, and he was a Malamed out of town. So a whole winter he was working out of town, and Erev Pesach, he's coming, or a couple of days before Pesach, he's coming back to town with 6 months of his earnings to bring money to his family that they'll have for Pesach to buy. On the way home, he stopped off in a village, and in the village there was somebody who the Poritz was putting him in his dungeon because he didn't pay up his rent. So this he says, how could I be faithful such a thing? So he took all the money that he had earned in the last 6 months, and he gave it to the Poritz to release this seed. So now the problem that he had was that how is he going to come home if he doesn't have any money? He was mamish embarrassed to go home. So he went back to his city, but he didn't come into the city. He stayed outside on the outskirts because he was simply embarrassed. Like, what's he supposed to tell his family? So his kids, the Tzvi Melech comes out. They're looking for him. They see him. They say, Tati, come on in. He says, I don't have money. I feel so bad. So they tell him, don't worry about it. Maybe should help him. Come in. So they're walking into the city, and a Poritz goes by in his carriage, and he drops a zekel of money. So he takes the money, and the kid says, Tati, aren't you afraid the Poritz is going to come retrieve the money? He said, no, without having b'tuchah, I was just giving that answer. That was it. And from that money, the family made Pesach. So we all know by the Seder, we have a minute by Shfoy Chamosra. We send a little child to open the door for Elionovi. So the kid opens the door. Says, Tati, the Poritz is here. So, no, it was Elionovi.
Oh, it really was.
The Poritz is Elionovi. The Poritz dropped was Elionovi. So Tati, that's the Poritz here. That was nice. Okay, we are up to the Bama Gemara, I believe. Right, we're up to the Bama Gemara. Yesterday we learned the last Mishnah that discussed the difference between the Kohen Mashuach, B'Shem HaMishchan, Meruba B'Gadim, and the difference between the Kohen Mishamish and the Kohen Sha'avar. And we said that the first part of our Mishnah is not consistent with Reb Meir, and the second part of Mishnah is consistent with Reb Meir, because Rabbi Yosy held that once you become a Kohen Gadol, you can't go back to be being a Kohen Hedjit. Yet you can't be a Kohen Gadol either because there'll be Eva. So because of that, you're correct, Mikan and Mikan. So the next time they ask you to volunteer to step in for the Kohen, think twice, because you might lose your entire career over it. We're on Daf Tes Amud Beis, the last Mishnah on the Amud Ein Bein Bama Gedola. So it says there's something called a Bamas. There were times where there was no centralized place to bring karbanos. And at that point, it was allowed to have your personal bamas. You were allowed to have your little mizbech in your backyard, and you were able to make your own karbanos. But you couldn't make any carbon you wanted there, and we're going to learn now which karbanos could be brought on bamas, which not, and which were. Now they had the mishkan, and then when the mishkan, then they had the mishkan in Shiloh, then it was charev. So in between, when there were mishkans there, and the Beis Hamikdash was charev, and the question is, after the Beis Hamikdash was built, is there any heter bamas as well? So that's going to be what we're going to be discussing today. So the Mishnah says, "Ein bein bama gedola lebama katana." There's no difference in the karbonos that you could bring on a bama gedola versus a bama katana. And Rashi tells us, "Ein bein bama im hefresh b'shas heter bamas." So we're not speaking about the points in time where bamas were outlawed. Of course, we're speaking about the points in history where bamas were allowed. In those times, there was no difference between a bama gedola. The Bama Gedola was Zemizbeach Shel Moshe, the Oidei B'Noi V'Givan. So before there was a proper Mishkan around, there was a bama that was the public bama that was used for the public, and also people had their own bamas that they used as well. The bama tana, which is a mizbeach shel yachid, shekol yachid v'yachid oisa bama la'atzmei. Everyone had a right to make their own little bama. So what were the difference? Ela psachim, only the korban psach. And the Gemara is going to elaborate on what's unique about korban psachim. Zaklal, the Mishnah then gives us a rule. Kol shuhu nida v'nida. Anything that's not a mandatory korban. It's a korban that you bring voluntarily. You say, shlomim, any personal korban that you're going to bring. Karev b'bama, you could be makriv on a bama tana. V'chol she'enei loy nida v'loy nida, any karev b'bama, you cannot be makriv on a bama. So let's see what the Gemara asks. First, you said that the only difference between the bama gedolah and the bama tana are psachim, which means that only psachim may not be brought on a bama tana, psachim may only be brought on a bama gedolah. But the problem is, a moment later we learned in our Mishnah, and the Mishnah says not only psachim, rather any korban that's not neither v'nidav will be able to be brought on a bama gedolah. So, for instance, a chatos, right, or a korban tamid. Oh, so this is what the Gemara is going to discuss. Right? That's the conversation we're entering. So Rashi says, Psachim v'sulai, v'katani seifa. A moment later, the Mishnah elaborates. Good morning, Shmuel. The Mishnah elaborates. Kol she'enei nida v'nida any karev b'bama tana. V'lu b'gedolah hoyu makrivin karbanos tzibur tamidin umusafin. On the bama gedolah, they brought the communal karbanos that were not nida v'nida. They didn't limit what they brought on the bama gedolah to korban psachims. They brought every type of korban. Because and at this point the Gemara feels the av chayvos tzibur she'ein kavu lahem zman, even chayvos tzibur that don't have a specific time, because there's a chayvos tzibur that has a specific time, like karbanos that I brought on Yom Tov, on Rosh Chodesh, the korban tamid, right, and the korban psachim. These are all korbanos that have to be brought at a specific time. But there's also a korban tzibur that don't have a set time, like a par helam davar shel tzibur. It's a public korban, but it doesn't have a specified time. So the Kesol Kedaitach, the av choyves sibur she'en kavu lamzman who you craving about. At this point, the Mishnah understands that since it's not nidav and nidav, korban and par helam davar shel tzibur, you'd also be able to bring that on the bama gedolah. Going par helam davar shel tzibur sir avodah zarah. So the Gemara's kasha is from the zaklal it's mashma that even if it's a non-scheduled korban, you could still bring it on the bama gedolah. Yet psachim seem to indicate that it's only scheduled karbanis, and for the Gemara, ema ke'ein psachim. What does that mean? So the Gemara is saying, in fact, that's not pshat in the zaklal of the Mishnah. But that's also with an additional condition that it has to be kavu lahem zman. It has to be ein psachim. So right now the rule is that anything that's nidav and nidav could even be brought on a bama tana. If it's not nidav and nidav, but it has a specific time, it could be brought on a public bama and bama gedolah. And if it's something that's not a scheduled korban, like a par helam davar shel tzibur, that cannot be brought at all. Zaktim mani. Who is our Mishnah going like? And Rashi says specifically, mani masnizim dekatani the bama tana ein kar b'shum choiva. Who is the Tana that holds that the bama tana you only allowed to bring karbonis nedava? The Amar the bama gedolah lo yadivimina. And even the bama gedolah, where you were allowed to bring a korban chayva, that's only a scheduled korban chayva. So tomorrow, Reb Shimon, that would be consistent with the Tana of Reb Shimon. The Tanya we learned, Reb Shimon Omer, Av tzibur lo yikrivu el psachim v'chayva shekavu lehem zman. Av chayva she'en kavu lehem zman, hacha v'hacha lo yikar, if you don't bring at all. Similar to what Mati said, but this is only speaking about chayva she'en kavu lehem zman. Let's see Rashi. Rabbi Shimon, Damar b'perek basha the tzvachim. Af tzibur lo yikrivu b'bama gedolah shum chayva. El psachim v'chayvish hakavu lem zman. Al v'chayvish en kavu lem zman. But chayvish that come because of incidences, not because of scheduled time of the year. Going parallel davar shel tzibur sir avodah zarah. Hacha v'hacha lo yikar. You're not allowed to bring any of these on any bama. But that's just the sheet of Rabbi Shimon. The Gemara is telling us that this is the sheet of Reb Shimon. Obviously, there's a bar plukta. So what does the bar plukta hold? And that's more like what he said. The Ha'amri they said Kol shatzibur makrivin ba'oil moed shebemidbar, makrivin ba'oil moed shebegilgal. Whatever they were makriv in the oil moed of the midbar, in the Mishkan, they were also able to be makriv in the Mishkan when it was in Gilgal, the Bama Gedolah, which was considered the Bama Gedolah. Va'afilu par helam davar, you're even allowed to be makriv par helam davar. So I misunderstood that. I was wrong. It's the opposite. So the Rabbanan held that the Bama Gedolah was exactly like the Mishkan, and you were allowed to be makriv any korban there without any restriction. But our Mishnah says dafka kein Pesach. So our Mishnah seems to indicate that you can't bring any korban in the Bama Gedolah, only something that's scheduled at a time of the year. That's why the Gemara says that our Mishnah follows the sheet of Rav Shimon. Zok the Gemara Vati. Ein ben Shiloi l'Yerushalayim. Now the Mishkan was set up in Shiloi. If I'm not mistaken, in Shiloi they had walls. They had stone walls, but the covering was still the covering of the Mishkan. It wasn't a Chaim Tzvi roof. It was just a tarp. It was a shmata. And Yerushalayim was the Beis Hamikdash. So there's no difference between the rules of Shiloi, and the rules of Yerushalayim. Ella, the only differences were Shiloi did not have the city of Yerushalayim, the walled city of Yerushalayim. So therefore, Kaddish Kalim, were you normally allowed to eat in all of Yerushalayim, where in Shiloi would you be able to eat it? So it's B'chal HaRoya. What does B'chal HaRoya mean? Rashi says B'chal Mokam Shuchal Lirosh Misham es Shiloi. And the question is, does that mean the city of Shiloi? Or does that mean Mishkan Shiloi? And there's a shaila in the Rishonim about what that is. But whatever it is, being that there's no wall around any type of city, the perimeter is dictated by how far you are, but you can still see Shiloi, either the city or Shiloi, the Mishkan itself. The Gemara explains the reasoning over there. Over Yerushalayim, it's Yerushalayim, the city of Yerushalayim, which had a wall. Of course, only if you're within the walls of Yerushalayim may you eat Kaddish and Kalim. The Chan, Sai by Shiloi and Sai by Yerushalayim, Kachim, which have to be eaten within the Azara itself, there were curtains that were around the Azara, and Kachim may only be eaten within the confines of those kloi. Zok to the Mishnah weiter, Kedusha Shiloi, the Kedusha of Shiloi, Yesh Acharei Heter. After Mishkan Shiloi was Charev, they still were allowed to do bomis because it was still an in-between stage. And Rashi says, bomis were allowed. The Gemara is going to discuss this in a minute as well. You didn't come yet to Manucha, which is referring to Shiloi. Why was it called Manucha? Because at that point they stopped conquering. They had already captured Eretz Yisrael. So you see that the two establishments of Makam Kedusha was Shiloi and Yerushalayim. Lama Chalkan HaKosov. Why did the Torah, or why did the Pasuk separate the different Kedushas, the different Batei Mikdash, so to speak, that were built? Because the Torah wanted to specifically tell us that in between Mishkan Shiloi and the building of the Beis Hamikdash, there was a heter bonus. So Mishkan Shiloi yesh acharei heter, between the Mishkan Shiloi and when the Beis Hamikdash was established. But the Kedushas Yerushalayim, once we had the Beis Hamikdash ein acharei heter, once the Beis Hamikdash was chorv, we can no longer have bomas. You can't just open up a bama in your backyard and start bringing korbanos. Amar Yitzchak, Shemati, I heard, Shemakrivin beveis Chaynov bizman hazeh. Who is Beis Chaynov? Who is Chaynov? And what is the house of Chaynov? So Rashi says, Chaynov b'noi shel Shimon HaTzadik. Chaynov was the son of Shimon HaTzadik, who was a Kohen Gadol. Bana bama b'Mitzrayim l'shem Shemayim. He built a bama in Egypt l'shem Shemayim, not to be makriv avodah zarah, rather to be makriv korbanos to the Rebbeinu Shalom kidamrinim b'Maseches Menachos. Now that's a very big problem because Tosfos asks right away, Heich makrivin shom b'tumah. How could you possibly be makriv a korban there if it's b'tumah? The hagazru tumah al eretz amim. There's a gzera that there's tumah in eretz amim. Can't be makriv korbanos b'tumah. Yeshlem is a Tosfos. The shemal gabi halay gazru chachamim tumah. Now the gzeras chachamim of tumah al eretz amim came after Chaynov set up his Beis Hamikdash or his bama. So it could be they grandfathered in his bama. This was, I guess.
Isn't there,
Into the second
isn't there
Mishnah.
a lav? There a lav about going back to Mitzrayim? What about that deraisa?
I'm not sure about that.
And
That-
you're
that
gonna
would-
build a bama there on top of that?
But there's
I
three
hear-
chayim. There's actually three chayim. There's Shimon HaTzadik's father was chayim, and his son is chayim,
Mhm.
right? But there was another chayim who built the base Hamikdash.
We're not talking about him either.
We're not talking about that.
We're talking about Chayim, the son of him.
So there's, right, so there's a guy who built the base of Mikdash, there was a guy who was a Rosha, there was a guy who built a Boma, who was a Tzaddik according to Rashi, and that's the fellow who we're talking about here now. He
Right.
Built a Boma,
Correct,
not a base of Mikdash.
correct.
After the base of Mikdash started, there was a
Well, that's what we're discussing over here. That's exactly the subject. Right? We just said Ein Achara Heter, so how does this?
No, this is during the base of
So it's a Kivin Shemin HaTorah Yachalakim.
This is the beginning of the base of Mikdash, but Shimon HaTzaddik.
You mean this was the beginning of second Mishnah English?
Yeah, Shimon HaTzadik's son.
Yeah.
There's a little line.
Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Shemati Shemakrivim Beveis Chayim Bizman Hazeh. His discussion is Bizman Hazeh, the times of Rabbi Yitzchak. So it could be the last. Yeah, vice versa. Kasavar, it must be that Rabbi Yitzchak holds, that Beis Chayim La Beis Avodah Zarah. And Rashi tells us because they were people who held that it was Avodah Zarah. So there's actually a dispute. Did Chayim have good intentions or did he have bad intentions? The Kasavar, Rabbi Yitzchak also must hold that Kedusha Rishona Kitcha Lashaita Veloy Kitcha Lasadlah. It must be that the Beis Hamikdash's Kedusha, once it was Chorv, is no longer there, and therefore there's a Heter bonus. Rashi is the Kasavar Kedusha in Sinskachi Yerushalayim, Eina Kedusha La'olam, which is Chorva Hutra bonus. Unlike what our Mishnah says, that Eina Achara Heter, Rabbi Yitzchak must have held that Yesh Achara Heter. Okay, weiter. Zog to Gemara weiter. Veloy Kitcha Lasadlah. Rashi says Kloimer Misha Chorv. It says in the pasuk, so the Torah is telling us that there were two establishments of a Makam HaMikdash. There was the Menucha and there was the Nachla, and we darshan like Rashi told us earlier, Menucha zu Yiloi, Nachla zu Yerushalayim. And therefore, Rabbi Yitzchak's shita would be to compare the two to each other. Makash Nachla leMenucha. The Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim will be compared to Mishkan Shiloh. Ma Menucha yesh acharei heter. Just like in Mishkan Shiloh, there was a heter bamas after it was chorv. Af nachla, so to the Beis Hamikdash itself, yesh acharei heter, you'd be allowed to build a bama afterwards, and that's why Rabbi Yitzchak says that you're allowed to be makar even bisman hazeh karbonis on the bama of chayim. Amr loy. So the Amr loy, they told Rabbi Yitzchak, Amr, did you really say that? Amr loy, no, I didn't say that. So he denied, meaning he was obviously chayzer from his original words. Amar Rabba halakim. Amar, I know you said it. Don't deny that you said it. You did say it. Ugemirna laminei. I actually learned it by you. I was in Shir that day and I heard it. I know you didn't like when we recorded the Shir, but I recorded it. So I know you said it, right? My time of it. So why are you being chayzer from your shita that you said then? Because there was a kasha there of Mori asked, which led you to reverse your opinion. The Moshe of Mori. Kedusha Shiloi yesh acharei heter. Kedusha Shushalayim ein acharei heter. Our Mishnah, where Mori asked the question from our very Mishnah. Our very Mishnah says that Kedusha Shushalayim ein acharei heter. So how could you, Rabbi Yitzchak, allow karbonos to be brought on the bam of Chaynov when our Mishnah says that will be impossible? We also have another kasha. It says Mishabol Yerushalayim. Once they came to Yerushalayim, Nesru Habamos, Bamos were also. And there was no longer a heter ever to be makar of Kabbalah and Bamos. And this is what it means in the pasuk El Mucha Vel Nachla. That's what it means. Rashi says Nachla. Hamar pasuk El Mucha Vel Nachla. Yerushalayim is the Nachla that's referred to in the pasuk. So Dr. Gemara, how is it that Rabbi Yitzchak was ever able to be matir if we have a Mishnah and a Brisa? We have two Mishnahs that say it should not be allowed. And for the Gemara Tanohi, in fact, this halacha of whether or not Yerushalayim maintained its kedusha lasad lovay, and therefore asers b'mois, that would be toiler in the machlokes tonight. If not, we learned a Mishnah. Amar Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer said, Shemati, I heard, kishahayu boyin behechol, when they were building the hechol, kishahayu boyin behechol asu kloyim lahechol. they put curtains around the Heichel, ukloim la'azara, and they put curtains around the Zara. So as they were building, when they came back for the second base of Mikdash, they wasn't built up right away. It took some time. So first they had curtains and then they built walls. But the kloim, the curtains around the Heichel, were positioned differently than the curtains that were positioned around the Zara. El Shabahechel boinin mibachutz. In the Heichel, let's say the walls have a footprint of 12 inches. They were much thicker than that, but let's say they were 12 inches. So the curtain was hung on the inside of that 12 inches, and they built the wall around it so that they should always be right? And when they were working, the workmen were outside the perimeter. But when they were working on the Azara, they put the curtains on the outside of the perimeter because you're not allowed to walk around in the Hechel, but you are allowed to walk around in the Azara. Zot Rashi, Kloyim Lahechel, at this point in Gemara things, B'makayim Chaymois Hechel, in the place of the walls of the Hechel, Shehei Mizbeach Haboni Ba'Azara, Kari Ashal Pesach Hayomoi. The reason why they needed to have makeshift walls is because the Mizbeach is only valid if it's Asher Pesach Oil Moed. So you need to have oil moed. So you need some type of partition. If it wasn't for them creating the makeshift walls, they would not have been able to be makar karbanos on the Mizbeach until the construction of the Heichel building was complete. The Hemes Chilul Hakav Karbanos Mishabol Sham B'Meikarish. But the moment they came, even before the completion of the construction of the Beis Hamikdash, they were already bringing karbanos. Ezra, that Esrim Ushnai Mishana Achar Kain, like Nigmar Bais, it took 22 years to finish. So for those 22 years, they had makeshift walls, Shalosh of the Yabashah. So yeah, but that's the best campaigns are building campaigns. But they didn't have money. The makeshift walls, the curtains were on the inside of the footprint of the wall. So the builders, the construction workers, should not enter the Heichel. So Zok to Gemara. Rabbi Yeshua commented about this. Shemati, I heard. Shemakrivin afalpi she'ein bayis. Oichlin kachim afalpi she'ein kloyim. I heard that you can be makar karbonas even though there's no Beis Hamikdash. They can eat kachim even though there's no kloyim, and they can eat kachim kalam and ma'aser sheni, which has to be in the city of Yerushalayim. Aval b'shein chayma. Why? If they kedusha rishayna, the kedusha from the Beis Hamikdash, kitcha l'shaita, the kitcha l'asad. So at first glance, when you read this Mishnah, it does seem like Rabbi Yeshua is arguing on Rabbi Eliezer. And Rabbi Yeshua said, kedusha rishayna, kitcha l'shaita, the kitcha l'asad, right? And Rabbi Eliezer doesn't agree with that. Zok Gemara lav machlal. Rabbi Eliezer sober loy kitcha l'asad lavai. It would indicate that Rabbi Eliezer argues. So you see, we've illustrated that there's a machlekes tanoim if kedusha rishayna, kitcha l'asad lavai, or only kitcha l'shaita. Let's see Rashi. Lav machal Rabbi Eliezer, the boy kloim, he requires kloim. Why does he require kloim? It's because loy kitcha l'achar kloim. The Makam HaMikdash was not kodesh after the Churban Bayis Rishon. Lefichach pirsu kloim b'makam binyan. That's why they had to create a new kedusha, and they did that using the curtains, the chazru v'kitchu, the taides v'shir. There was a whole inauguration ceremony. So maybe that's the machlokes, whether Rabbi Yeshua held he didn't have to do anything. All the kedusha was exactly as it was from before, and you could just bring karbanos as it is without any curtains. And Rabbi Eliezer held that they needed to make these curtains. So we've illustrated the machlokes if kedusha rishon and kitchen lost love or not. Amalei Ravina Ravashi, what's the raya? Mimai. It's not love dafka that that's the machlokes. Dilma the chula ama kedusha rishon kitcha l'shaita the kitcha lost love. Maybe even Rabbi Eliezer agrees that the kedusha is still there. So you might, and they're not arguing. So what is this discussion? Umar ma'idishmi lekamar. Umar ma'idishmi lekamar. There's not a machlokes being quoted in this Mishnah. Rather, Rabbi Eliezer was saying over what he heard, that in fact they had curtains. And an independent, totally unlinked fact is what Rabbi Yeshua said, that Kedusha Rishona, Kitchel Shaita, Kitchel Lavoi. And don't say the fact that Rabbi Eliezer needed curtains shows that they had to reestablish the Kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash. It's just two people sharing their memories of what occurred. So you're going to ask, why did they need to have Kloim if the Kedusha was there? Without it, they could have anyway brought the Chabanis. The Tznius of Ba'alma. We always want everything to be Tznius. As a matter of fact, even in the Mishkan, in the Midbar, the Kloim were 5 amas higher than the Mizbeach, because it's al Tznius. No one should be able to just look in and yenta around and see what's going on. So Rabbi Eliezer was making that statement that they had curtains for Tznius, but it had nothing to do with the fact that they had to build a Beis Hamikdash. So Ibazah, you don't have a bona fide raya that there's somebody who holds Kedush Rishona like Kitchelas and Love. Yeah, that's because workers shouldn't be in the footprint. That's regardless. Even if it's for Tznius, workers shouldn't be in the footprint of the Heichel. But at the end of the day, we were trying to find a support for Rabbi Yitzchak, for Rabbi Yitzchak's Havamina, before he was Chayzer, that Kedush Rishona like Kitchelas and Love, we haven't really found a good raya that will stand. Ella Kihana Tanoi. Let's find another set of Tanoim that will illustrate a machlokes about Kedush Rishon. Tanya, Amar Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosy. Lama not Manu Chachamim es Elu. When they came back into Eretz Yisrael, Rashi says, es Elu Ayoris Nimnu Beperk Basu de Erchin in Batei Arechayma. There was a whole bunch of cities that were listed off that are Batei Arechayma. What is the importance of identifying which are Batei Arechayma? Because we know if you sell a house in a city with a wall, you have 1 year to redeem it, and if not, you lost it permanently. So it was very important that everybody knew with clarity which of those cities had that policy. So why were they identified? There were 9 cities that were listed off as cities that were Batei Arechayma. So why were these listed? When they came back from the Golus, the 70-year Golus, Matzu es Elu v'Kichum. They found these 9 cities and they were Mekadosh them. Aval Harishonos Batlu, but the original cities that were Mekadosh Chayma are going to be their kedusha of Batei Chayma were Batlu Mishabat La'aretz. So you see that this kedusha Rishonim Kitchel Lasad Lava or Kitchel Lashaita isn't just about the kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash and the kedusha of the Eretz Yisrael for eating things. It also has to do with financial transactions. The reason why Batei Chayma retains its status is also totally in this Kedusha Rishona Kitchel Lasad Lava. The Gemara is equating the two. Because if you buy a house and you don't buy back within a year, you lose it. That has nothing to do. I would argue that has nothing to do with Kedusha. That's a halach and chayshon mishnah. But the Gemara clearly is stating that also is totally in this same shaila. So Lamu Lanu Chamaselu Shechshalu B'nei Agad L'Matzu Aselu V'Kitchum Al Rishon Batlu Mishabit La'aretz. Alma, you see clearly, Kasavar Kedusha Rishona, Kitchel L'Shaita, V'loi Kitchel Lasad Lava. So that's a very direct proof that you have a Shita who holds that they had to be Mekadosh, that the Mekadosh cities once again to give them the Kedusha of a Batei Erchan. Rabbi Yitzchak said that you're allowed to be Makav Karbanis in this Bama Beis Chayna. So that must be that the Kedusha of the Beis Hamikdash is no longer there, and therefore there's a Heter Bamas. For Gemara, we have another brisa that contradicts this brisa. And it's also Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosy. So it's going to be a stira in Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosy. Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosy. You think there were only those 9 cities? There were many, many cities that were Batei Arechayma. Which means they were Batei Arechayma. Many more than the 9 that they reestablished when they came back from Golus Bavel. So why were these listed off? There were many other cities there. So if all said just pick these 9 cities, the reason is because when they came back, these are the cities that they found. Kitchum, they're Mekadosh them. Hashta, now, so you tell me they're Mekadosh them now when they came back. Amri, you just said you said a moment ago that you don't have to be Mekadosh them. And where did you say you don't have to Mekadosh them? We didn't yet read the end of this brisa. We're going to quote shortly the end of the brisa, and shortly the end of the brisa is very specifically that when they came back from Golus Bavel, they didn't have to be Mekadosh the cities. Unlike what the brisa we just learned said that to be Mekadosh them again, This Brisa is going to say explicitly they didn't need to be Mekadosh them again. So why did they just list these 9 cities? They happen to have found these cities and they listed them off, just to list them off, but not because they needed any special process to be Mekadosh them. They found them, so they listed them. The other ones they didn't find. Not only these cities are considered Batei Arichaima and have the rule that if you buy a house, if you buy the house and it's not redeemed within the year, you can keep it. Ella, Kol Shetalach, any city that you'll discover, you have historical proof. All of these rules apply. So Rashi says, what all the mitzvahs? The halacha that a mitzvah must be out of the walls of the city, out of the perimeter of the city. Kriyas Megilla b'chamisha asar. And the third thing is that if you sell the house and you don't redeem it within a year, you lose it. So you see clearly that automatically they didn't need to be re-established. Why? So this brisa is very explicit that Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosy says that the kedusha remains, and you don't need to rededicate these cities. So we have a steer in brises because the brisa we just quoted a second ago from Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosy said the kitchum they had to be mekadosh them again, and this brisa Rabbi Shmuel is very clear that you don't need to be mekadosh them again. Kashad Rabbi Shmuel ad Rabbi Shmuel. It's a steer in Rabbi Shmuel himself. So tomorrow, Trey Tanoim, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosy, and must be two Tanoim have a machlokes about what the opinion of Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yosy is. But for our purposes, Rabbi Yitzchak has a very good person to rely on for his original havamina that the Beis Chayna you're allowed to be makav karbanos there because you have a Tana clearly holds kitcha rishona la kitcha lost love. The boy sema, or you could say ha Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yosy Amar. The second brisa is not Rabbi Shmuel Rabbi Yosy, it's Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yosy. The Tanya Rabbi Lezer Rabbi Yosy Amar asher loy chayma. Loy is spelled normally. Loy meaning it has a wall would be spelled lamed vav, but there's an aleph there. What does the aleph mean? So we darshan afal pisha ein loy achshav v'hoy loy kaidmachin. So asher loy chayma with the vav it had a wall. Asher loy chayma with the aleph now it doesn't have a wall. Even though it doesn't have a wall now, but it had a wall back then in the days of Yeshua ben Nun, it's still considered forever a batei orechem. Okay, now we're getting into pure Agada to Gemara, Geshmak Gemara. Chaim told me about Yud Beis, but we're now on Yud. Zok Gemara, it was in the days of Achashverosh. Amar Ableim, Vitem Rabbi Yonason. Dover Zem Esarish B'Yadeni Me'anchek Knesses Agdola. We know this from the Anchek Knesses Agdola. Kol Mokum Shnemer Vayihi. When it says Vayi, Eino Eloshim Tsar, it's Vayi Yehi. Vayi Oivei. This is what happened. It says Vayi B'Mei Achashverosh. What happened? Have a Haman. You see, it was Haman. Although it's a little bit interesting because Vayi B'Mei Achashverosh is introducing the first parak of the Megillah. Haman doesn't show up till way later. But the Mefarshim tell us that it was the Nehenim and Yishudas Achashverosh that led to Haman. So that's why Vayihi is already at the beginning, because Vayihi B'Mei Achashverosh is talking about the Suda Achashverosh. Vayihi B'Mei Shvayta Shaytim, which is in Rus, have a rob, there was a hunger. Vayihi Kehachel Ha'adam L'Raiv, this is this is what led into the Mabel. Then it says Vayar Hashem Ki Rabba Ras Adam, which led to the Mabel. It says Vayihi B'Nasa Mekedim, which is B'Dadar Floga, and then they said Hava Nivna Lanu Ir. It says Vayihi B'Mei Amrofel, also Muchama. So that's obvious, right? This is in Abraham's times. Vayihi means it led to a war. It was like a world war. It was like 5 kings against 6 kings, right? Vayihi b'Yosy Yishuv Yerichai v'Char b'Shlufa b'Yadai. We learned this. That was after the night before they captured Yerichai. The Malach came to Mon Yeshua for the Avera of Bittul Torah. So that was a Vayihi, and then it says Vayihi Hashem is Yeshua, which is after Hashem helped Yeshua win Yerichai. There were moil b'cherem. Achan was moil in the cherem. He had a noah from the spoils of Yerichai, and that caused him to get hurt by Ai. The Mal b'nei Israel. Then the Vahi Ish Echad Minhar Masayim, which is referring to Chana. Yes, Chana of Hashem Sagarachma. You see that Chana had a tzara; she couldn't have children. Vahi Kizak and Shmuel. When Shmuel got old, Halchu Banav B'drachav, and his children didn't follow his ways. That's also bad. But it says, "Vahi David l'chol derach of maskul Hashem Yimai," and then what happened right after that? Vahi Shaul, Avinus David, Shaul was tormenting David. That's right. In Yeah, that's that's good. But later on, it is a positive. The Gemara is going to say the Mashkan, it is positive. Now the Gemara is saying he's negative, but we're going to change that very shortly. So Vayiki Yosef HaMelech B'Veisai, which is David HaMelech, and then it says Rakat Alo Simna Bayis. David was told by the Rebbeinu Shalom he's not going to be Zoich to build a Beis Mikdash. Frank Gemara, how could you say that Vayihi is a bad connotation? It's leading to something bad. That's the day they inaugurated the Mishkan. That was Kulei Simcha. But Tanya Oysa Yom Oysa Simcha Lofnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu Ki Yom Shenivru Bo Shemayim V'Aretz. And I'll show you another place where he means happiness. Ksiv hacha vayhi b'yom hashmini, ksiv hasam vayhi erev vayhi vayhi yom echad, which is a great day of simcha. It was the day Hashem created the world. Zok the Gemara, no. Vayom hashmini, there was some sadness there. Hashachiv nadav avihu died on that day. I v'ksiv vayhi b'shmoinim shana v'arba mea shana, which I believe is the day they inaugurated the Beis Hamikdash. Which is the shidduch of Yaakov and Rachel, which is good. Which is the day Hashem created the first day of the creation. Every single day of the week, which is good. Hashem created the world. So Amar Bashi, let's take a step back. The word Vayi itself doesn't mean good, doesn't mean bad. It could be either one. Vahi can be used to introduce good, it can be used to be introduce bad. But Vahi be may, when it says Vahi be may, that always means bad. Eino ela loshen sar. And there's 5 of them. Chamisha Vahi be may have. There's 5 examples of Vahi be may. It says Vahi be may cheshveros. It says Vahi be may shvoita shoytim. Then it goes to the Chumash Vahi be may amrofel. Then it's Vahi be may achaz. Vahi be may achaz was not one that was listed up until now. So let's see what Achaz I think was led to a king going off to derech and doing bad things. It's by Mitzchav Gimel over here at the bottom. So let's quickly see what it says. Achaz ben Yosy ben Azeu Melech Yudah Allah Ritzin Melech Haram Upakmar Melo. So they got attacked. They got attacked. So it was leading into a bad thing. Vahi be Yayakim. That's Yayakim was already leading into the Golus Bavel.
Interesting to note if anybody makes explain the order of these riots of these.
Interesting you bring that up because the Mefarshim do ask a kasha and ask, okay, I understand why when it lists off the 5, it starts with Vahi b'mei cheshveros, we're in Maseches Megillah, but the next one should be in the Chumash. It should have started from Vahi b'mei amrofel. Why did it go to Rus? So that is asked. I forgot what the teretz is, but that is definitely asked. So it's a good point to bring up. So Zog to Gemara Vayter. Zog to Gemara Vayter. We know this is a fact that the Amutz v'Amatzia, there were 2 brothers. One was Amutz, one was Amatzia, and this is significant. Acham hapu. Why is it relevant to me to know that Amutz and Amatzia were brothers? Now, Rashi just gives us a little sneak peek and tells us who they were. Amutz was the father of Yeshaya, so Amutz was the father of a Novi, and Amatzia was a Melech Yudah. He was a king himself. So this mother who had these 2 children had children that were very rich and famous. I don't mean rich, I mean they were very for children, right? One of them was the father of a Novi, and one of them was actually a king. So who is this mother? Who do these people come from? So tomorrow, Ma'aka Mashalon, Yodar Rab Shmuel ben Achmeni Amar B'yon Yison, Kol Kala she tznu beveis Chamel, a Kala who's tznuah in the house of her father-in-law, Zoicha v'yoytzim imena malachim u'nevi. She'll be zoicha that will come out of her malachim and neviim. So here you have Amutz and Amatzia, they're brothers. One represents neviim, one represents malachim. Who are their parents? Where do they come from? Minalam Tamar. These are all eniklach of Tamar. He kisses upon her. Why did Yehuda think that she was a Zoina? Because her face was covered. A Zoina exposes herself. A Zoina is trying to lure you. So what does that mean? Ella, since she was very tzniistic in the house of her father-in-law, in the house of Yehuda, he didn't even know what she looked like. He didn't know what she looked like. So therefore, B'derech, when he saw her, he didn't realize that this was his daughter-in-law. She was Zoicha that should come out of her Malachim and Nevi'im. Malachim is David, Nevi'im The Amar Belevi, what we just quoted, Mesaris Yazdenu Me'avisenu, that Amos V'Amatcha Achameim, Uchsiv Chazoin Yishayahu ben Amoitz. So this Amoitz was the father of Yishayahu Navi, which then leads back to Tamar, who was the great great grandmother of these children. Amar Belevi, Davos Mesaris Yazdenu Me'avisenu, Mokem Aron Einem and Amida. The Kodesh HaKodeshim was 10 amos by 10 amos. If you had the Aron inside the Beis Hamikdash or inside the Kodesh HaKodeshim, and you took your measuring tape and you measured from each side of the Aron to the outer wall, you'd get 5 amos, right? It was 20 by 20 or it was 10 by 10? It was 10 by 10, right? It was 10 by 10. So then you, in the Mishkan at least, so you would get 10 amos on either side, which means the Makam Aron didn't take up any space. Aron Shas Moshe Yesh Lo Eser Amos L'Chol Ruach. No, it was 20 by 20, obviously, because when you measure 10 amos from the Aron to the each outer wall, there was 10 amos there. So clearly, it didn't take up any space. Uksiv v'lefnei.
So clear.
I'm sorry.
It wasn't so clear that it didn't take up space, but it didn't.
Right. V'lefnei advir esrim ama oirich. It says in front of the dvir, in front of Kodesh Kodashim, it was 20 amos long. Uksiv knaf hakruva echad eser amos uknaf hakruva echad eser amos. Each crew took up 10 amos. So each crew took up 10 amos. Oren gufa hecha havakoy. How is there room for the Oren if each of the crewim took up 10 amos? That fills the entire space. Allah Shamina, Benes Hayaimid, it must have been in the nace. Now the Mefarshim asked, the crewim were up above. So why couldn't the Oren have been beneath them? Right? And that wouldn't be so what's the ride from the crewim over here? What's the ride from the crewim over here? The crewim were up above.
Meaning we're mentioning the crewim?
Yeah, the Gemara just brought a ride from the crewim. The Gemara said the crewim took up the full 20 amos of the Kodesh HaKodeshim. So the Gemara asked, so where was the Oren? So the Mefarshim asked, there's room for the Oren and the crewim to coexist, because the wings that were part of the 10 amos span were over the Oren, right? So that's what the Mefarshim asked. They were very huge, indeed, yeah.
So why do all the little not
That I can't answer. I don't know. So I want to know if he asked the kasha. I don't remember what his teretz was, but the kasha was a very good kasha. It's the Tur Evan. Actually, the Tur Evan, because it is, actually takes this pasuk out and actually brings the other pasuk of Lefnei Advir Esher Mama. Right. So Tur Evan, because it is, actually is not Gorish this completely. Rabbi Yonasan pasuk la Pischa la Hyper Shas Mahach. Whenever Rabbi Yonasan wanted a darshan about the Megillah, this is where he would begin his drush. It says in the pasuk the Kamte Aleim, which is talking about Hashem destroying Babel, V'chreisi leBabel, Shem Usher V'nin V'nechet N'um Hashem. I'm going to destroy them in all these ways. Shem Zaksav, which means I'm going to destroy their ksav, their writings. Okay. Then it says She'er Zaloshan, I'm going to destroy their language. Nin Zamalus, I'm going to destroy their malus. The Nechet, their enical Zu Vashti, I'm destroying Vashti, and in fact Vashti was killed. When he wanted to say Purim Torah, he started from here. It says Tachas and Natzutz, instead of the thorn, Yalav Roish will be beautiful to someone growing. Tachas Sirpad, which is also something you don't want growing, Yal Hadas. So we dash Tachas and Natzutz, who's the weed, who's the thorn, is Tachas Hamana Rosha, Sha'asa Atma Avodah Zarah. He made himself into Avodah Zarah, the Chsiv, V'chol HaNatzutzim, V'chol HaNalulim, which are referring to Avodah Zarah. Yalav Roish, instead of Haman will be Roish, and Mordechai, Shenikir Roish Shel Chol HaBasamim. Mordechai was considered the head of the Basamim. Why? Shenemar Ba'ach, Ba'ata Kach Ol HaBasamim Roish, Morderor, which is the Simonim of the Ptaris, Mutekaminon, Mordichi. So Mordechai is the Morderor, the first, the Roish Shel Basamim. Tachas HaSirpod, what's that? That's Tachas Vashti Rosha, Bas Benoy Shel Nebuchadnezzar Rosha, Shesoraf Refidas Beis Hashem. He burnt the gold plating of the Beis Hamikdash. In other words, he destroyed the Beis Hamikdash. Tiksiv Refidasa Zolav. Instead of her, Yal Hadas, Zu Esther Tzedekes, Shenikras Hadasa, Shenemar V'Yoiminis Hadasa. So you see that Hashem put Esther instead of Vashti. V'Oyal Hashem L'Shem. What does that mean? Zu Mikra Megilla. That's referring to the Mikra Megillah. La'Ois Olam Lo Yikares, which is the pasuk that we learn by Tanis Tzibur. Elimei Purim, that will be forever. Reb Shimon Levi started saying Purim Torah from here. It says, just like Hashem used to be happy to do good things for Klal Yisrael, Ken Yosis Lahara Eschem. Strike the Gemara. Umi Chadia Kadosh Baruch Hu the Mapalasim Shaloshaim. Can you say that Kadosh Baruch Hu is happy when Rishayim are going down? V'aksiv b'tzeis lefnei achalutz v'oimim hoidul Hashem kitov. No, it says hoidul Hashem kiloim chastoy, but they omitted kitov. The Malachim omitted the kitov. When they were thanking Hashem here, why didn't they say kitov? Hashem doesn't want you to say kitov when Rishoyim are dying. The HaKadosh Baruch Hu's nivroim as well. This is by Yitzis Mitzrayim, by the Yamsuf. Bikshu Malachi Asharis Leimer Shira. The Malachi Asharis wanted to say Shira that the Mitzrayim were destroyed. Omar Kadosh Baruch Hu, my Seyadai Toivin B'Yam, my Seyadayim, the Mitzrayim are drowning. V'atem Oimrim Shira, and you want to say Shira? So Kadosh Baruch Hu is not happy when there's tsar going on. So the problem is, what does it mean in the pasuk? Ken Yosis, Hashem is going to be happy when we Ken Yosis Lahara Eschem. So Mabelazar, who Einisas? Yosis doesn't mean Hashem will be happy. It means Hashem is going to make it that the goyim who are tormenting us and all of their friends are going to be happy that we're in trouble. Clear messes. Hashem will give the other goyim an opportunity to celebrate our tsar. And that's because using that, he's going to redeem us by punishing them. For Dekanami, and I can prove it from the Lashon of Pasuk itself, this is Ken Yosis. Ken Yosis means Hashem will make a third party happy, Lo Yisais, which would mean Hashem himself is happy. Shmamino. Rav Abba Bar Kahana, Pasuk La Pischa, La Parashasa, Mehacha, it says La Adam Shetoiv Lefanav, Nasan Chachma Vadas V'Simcha. For a person that Hashem likes, he's in Chachma, Das, and Simcha. Zeh Mordechai Atzadik. That's referring to Mordechai Atzadik. But the Chayte, the pasuk says, Nasan Inyan Lesav and Lichnois. Hashem will create a scenario that it should be taken down. Zeh Haman. Losses Latoiv Lefnei Lakim. Zeh Mordechai Esther. The Chsiv Atasam Esther is Mordechai al Beis Haman. So it says, well, the Chayte Nasan Inyan Lesav and Lichnois. Because Hashem will give the Chayte an opportunity to get a lot of money and to build an estate and to build wealth. You know why? Because eventually what did Hashem do? He put Esther al Beis Haman. He put Mordechai al Beis Haman. So he let Haman gather wealth, accumulate wealth, because all that was going to be transferred to Mordechai and Esther. Then the Chsiv Atasam Esther is Mordechai al Beis Haman. I guess it's getting very, very late. So I guess we can stop over here. So we'll stop here. Mission will be Mamshech tomorrow. Shkoyach everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. We should be zeicher to all the brachas, the Megillah. Now the question is, what should we